At 3:47 p.m., the CEO's assistant was screaming in the parking lot. HR replaced me with a girl who had an MBA and said, "You'll understand." As she took my office, I was silent. Until the regulator refused to speak to anyone but me, they begged me to come back. At exactly 3:47 p.m., I watched the CEO's executive assistant, Lena Harper, sprint through the rain-soaked parking lot, heels clapping against the asphalt, eyes locked on my car like it was her last hope. Her mascara was running. Her voice cracked through the window as I rolled it down an inch. "Please, Iris, Commissioner Brooks won't speak to anyone but you. He's threatening to shut us down." 3 hours earlier, I'd been escorted out of my corner office in complete silence. Not a word of warning. No meeting. Just a banker's box slammed onto my desk by Charmin from HR and a smug, wide-eyed stranger already waiting to take my place. "She has a dual degree from Stanford and Columbia," Charmin said, not meeting my gaze. "You'll understand." I didn't respond. I just looked down at the shattered glass paperweight gifted to me by the Illinois Commissioner of Public Safety for resolving last year's federal audit disaster. I picked up the broken pieces, let the sharp edges bite into my palm for a second, then dropped them in the trash. Her name was Dahlia Roth, early 30s. Perfectly pressed navy blazer still creased from the store hanger. "I'm here to modernize regulatory compliance," she chirped. "Top of my class." I'd given 16 years of my life to Westward Industrial Systems in Aurora. I knew the inspection habits of every state and federal regulator. I'd eaten holiday meals with auditors, babysat their kids, and built a system so airtight that agencies used us as a benchmark. And now, I was being replaced by someone whose blazer was still stiff with packaging starch. I nodded once, placed my handwritten compliance ledger in the box, containing a decade and a half of insider knowledge, and walked out without another word. Nobody made eye contact. Not Ben from legal. Not Martina from engineering. No one. That would have been the end of it. But by 3:47 p.m., Lena Harper was slapping her palm against my fogged-up car window, breathless. "Commissioner Brooks is threatening a site-wide violation." Dahlia tried quoting regulations at him. He walked out of the meeting. "He's demanding you. We have 12 minutes before he shuts down the plant." I glanced at the company's 5-story glass tower, a building I'd helped protect from millions in federal fines over the years. I turned to her slowly. "How's that Ivy League diploma working out so far?" Quick pause. If you've ever been blindsided by someone who thought a piece of paper made them better than your hard-earned experience, smash that like button. And tell me in the comments, has anyone ever underestimated you at work? Let's get back to it. My name is Iris Mendoza. I don't have an MBA. What I do have is institutional memory, trust, and a compliance system I built from the ground up. And today was the day they realized exactly who they'd tossed aside. I let the silence stretch just long enough to watch Lena squirm. Then I said flatly, "Here's what I want. I want my office back today. I want the title of Chief Compliance Officer. I want a 60% raise. And I want Dahlia Roth assigned to me as an assistant for 6 months. Minimum." Lena blinked. We can probably do." "Not probably," I cut in. "Definitely, and one more thing. I want an apology from Board Chairwoman Madeline Strickland, a public one, in front of the entire executive team." Her mouth fell open. "I don't know if I can promise." Then enjoy the headlines. "Westward Faces emergency plant shut down amid compliance collapse." Investors will love that. 10 minutes later, I walked back into the building I was humiliated in hours earlier. The marble floors gleamed, and the executive hallway fell dead silent. I passed Dahlia, who stood frozen near the reception desk, her arms wrapped protectively around a thick binder. When I entered the conference room, Commissioner Brooks turned, his cane tapping against the tiled floor. His lined face softened the second he saw me. "Iris Mendoza," he said with a nod. "Cutting it close." "Traffic," I said with a hint of a smile. "How's Morgan settling in at the Air Force Base?" he grunted. "Says the food's so bad, he misses my cooking." I chuckled and motioned toward the inspection packet. "Let's get started." Dahlia trailed behind me like a chastised intern while I led Brooks and his team through every corridor. I introduced new staff, recalled inspectors' preferences, answered questions before they were even asked. Dahlia's expensive watch flashed each time she flipped pages, lost and fumbling, while I navigated the inspection like a symphony conductor. By 6:30 p.m., Brooks signed off on the documents and gave a rare smile. Still the best in the business, he muttered before heading out. CEO Trenton Voss was waiting outside my office. That was incredible, he stammered. We were wrong. I was wrong. Correct, I said, unlocking my drawer and pulling out my old inspection journal. Let's talk about how you're going to fix that mistake permanently. Dahlia was officially demoted to assistant by morning. The irony. She now sat at the very desk I'd started at 16 years ago. I wasted no time. I made her my shadow. Every meeting, every audit, every inspector's lunch. She had to sit there and watch how real relationships built a firewall stronger than any software or textbook. And while she sat scribbling, I was working on something far bigger than a return. I was planning something she, and Madeline Strickland, would never see coming. It started with quiet strategy. I introduced Phase 1 of a compliance overhaul plan. The board approved it, mostly because they feared losing their only shield. I planted Belle, another junior staffer I trusted, as a liaison to monitor executive chatter. What she reported back made my blood run cold. Turns out, Madeline wasn't done. She'd already hired outside consultants to develop a new AI-powered compliance system. Her plan: strip me of real authority and replace my department with software. Dahlia overheard her making calls late one night. She's planning to erase you, Dahlia whispered, her voice tight. They think replacing you with tech will make them bulletproof. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Maybe she finally understood. You can't automate relationships. You can't code trust. You can't digitize 15 years of understanding what makes regulators tick. I want in, she added. Whatever you're planning, I want to help. I said nothing, not yet, but inside I smiled. She was learning. The following morning, I walked into my restored corner office and found a binder already waiting on my desk. It wasn't mine. It was Dahlia's. Inside were detailed profiles of every current board member, voting records, stock positions, internal memos, even rumors. She'd done her homework. You compiled this, I asked, raising an eyebrow as she hovered near the door. She nodded. You keep profiles on inspectors. I figured the board deserved the same treatment. For the first time since she arrived, I saw something more than ambition in her. I saw strategy, hunger, and maybe a little guilt. I motioned for her to sit. We have one shot at this, I said, so listen closely. What followed was a briefing no classroom could prepare her for. I showed her the web of relationships I'd built over the years with inspectors, commissioners, even political advisors on the Regulatory Oversight Council. I walked her through a map of pressure points, where Westward's competitors were vulnerable, where whispers of bribery and safety violations had surfaced, and how I'd quietly been gathering evidence. She looked stunned. You've been building this for years, I nodded. It's not revenge, it's insurance. The next step was delicate. I scheduled a private lunch with Commissioner Brooks and 2 other senior inspectors. Nothing formal, just coffee, grilled cheese, and a side of ethics chat. 3 days later, the Regulatory Oversight Council opened a confidential inquiry into Westward's top 3 competitors: Crestpoint Materials, Hargrave Processing, and Eastline Manufacturing. Violations, bribery, cover-ups. I didn't leak anything, but I didn't stop the wave either. Then came the emergency board meeting. I walked in with Dahlia beside me, silent, notepad in hand. The air was thick. Madeline Strickland sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 tech consultants from New York. Today's agenda, she began, includes a presentation on transitioning compliance functions into a fully digital platform. Perfect. I stood calmly. Before we digitize our conscience, I have a few things to share. I handed each board member a sealed envelope. Then I clicked the remote. Behind me, the screen lit up with charts comparing Westward's spotless compliance record against our competitors, 3 of whom were now under federal investigation. Page 1, I said, nodding toward their folders. 0 critical violations across 16 quarters. I clicked again. Page 2, projected financial impact if we face the same level of scrutiny our competitors are currently under. Whispers erupted. Even the tech consultants stopped tapping their tablets. How do you have this data? Madeline snapped. Relationships, I said. The same ones you tried to replace with a software patch. I let that hang before continuing. The The commission has asked me to testify regarding unethical practices in the industry. They trust me to help draft the next generation of regulatory policies. You're bluffing, Madeline growled. I raised an eyebrow. Check your inbox. A moment later, phones vibrated across the room. The email subject line read, RE, Advisory Board Invitation, Regulatory Oversight Council. The blood drained from her face. Then I dropped the real bomb, a second folder. My proposal, I said, for restructuring the compliance department. More authority, more budget, a new ethics council reporting directly to me, and a clause that protected whistleblowers from board retaliation. Kent, the CEO, skimmed it wide-eyed. This shifts the entire power structure. Correct, I said. Or we can roll the dice with federal investigators and hope they find our records inspiring. Madeline stood. This is blackmail. This is leverage, I said coolly. Based on trust, data, and results. Things you underestimated when you threw me out like office furniture. No one said a word, because they all knew I'd won. They signed. Every single board member, except Madeline, voted in favor of my restructuring plan. She sat motionless, her jaw clenched so tight it looked like her molars would crack. Kent avoided eye contact. Madeline slowly rose from her seat, her hands shaking as she gathered her untouched presentation notes. This isn't over, she whispered as she passed me. You just made yourself a target. I smiled. So make your move, Madeline, but just know this time I'm aiming back. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate pivoting. Press releases were prepped. Investor calls scheduled. I was given the full resources of the communications team to frame our company as a model of ethical resilience. Meanwhile, Dahlia transformed. She no longer bragged about her degrees. She listened. She watched. She learned. In meetings, she stopped correcting people with textbook jargon and started asking questions like, what do they really care about? And what's the part they're not saying out loud? One night, I found her alone in the records room, poring through reports from the year I first joined. What are you looking for? I asked. She looked up, blinking. I'm trying to figure out when the company turned the corner, when it went from always reactive to being 3 steps ahead. I answered quietly, the day we stopped treating regulations as threats and started treating them as opportunities to earn trust. She didn't respond. But the next day, she sent me a revised draft of our inspection briefing that even included handwritten notes on every inspector's personal quirks, like who hated artificial sweeteners, who preferred binders over tablets, who once fined another company for using the wrong font on hazard signs. She was learning fast, but she wasn't the only one evolving. I noticed something strange one morning while reviewing weekly internal memos, a discrepancy in the production plant's chemical inventory. Small, almost insignificant, but it triggered a memory, an old violation from 2009, nearly identical. I pulled the archived file, same anomaly, same supplier. Only back then we had changed vendors immediately. This time, the same supplier had been reapproved 6 weeks ago by Madeline Strickland herself. I cross-checked recent approvals. 6 vendor renewals, all rushed through by Madeline's office without proper vetting. Every one of them connected to either Hargrave or Crestpoint, 2 of the companies now under federal investigation. My pulse spiked. She hadn't just tried to replace me with software. She had been feeding our infrastructure to competitors under investigation. I showed the findings to Dahlia. She stared at the documents in stunned silence. Why would she do this? I didn't have a full answer. Yet. But I knew what came next. I picked up my phone. Commissioner Brooks, it's Iris. I think we've got something bigger than just negligence. This might be collusion. Commissioner Brooks didn't hesitate. Send everything, he said. The moment I hung up, I locked my office door, scanned every file twice, and flagged anything connected to Madeline's approvals. Dahlia sat across from me, pale but focused. This was no longer about power plays or proving our worth. This was federal. By noon the next day, a black SUV rolled into the executive lot. 2 agents from the Department of Regulatory Oversight, DRO, walked past reception without a word. They were here for files, interviews, a formal inquiry. At 2:15 p.m., Madeline was escorted out of her office with her laptop bag and a stunned expression. She didn't say a word, not to me, not to Kent, not to anyone. Over the next 30 days, the story exploded across the business world. Westward compliance scandal triggers national industry sweep. But this time, we weren't the villains. Because of the evidence I turned over and the reforms I had implemented, Westward became the shining example of accountability. We earned exclusive immunity. And when Crestpoint and Hargrave's CEOs resigned in disgrace, guess who was asked to represent the entire manufacturing sector at the Federal Regulatory Summit? Me. I stood on stage in D.C., the Capitol dome visible through the windows behind me, and laid out the blueprint for how compliance should work, built on trust, consistency, and yes, experience. And just like that, my ledger, the one I started 16 years ago, became a national training manual. Back home in Aurora, Westward's stock climbed 42%. The board, completely restructured. Kent stepped down, citing a need for fresh leadership with deeper ethics credentials. Guess who they named interim CEO? Me. It was Dahlia who brought me the official letter. She stood in the doorway of my now even larger office, holding it with both hands. "You earned this," she said. I looked up at her. "So did you." Her eyes widened. I handed her a folder. "Deputy Compliance Officer, full promotion. You'll oversee the new Ethics Onboarding Division." She looked down at the title, speechless. I don't deserve this after what I did." "Maybe not," I said, "but growth isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, owning your mistakes, and doing the work." She swallowed hard. "Thank you," I nodded. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have trusted you with my coffee order. Now, you're exactly the kind of leader I want building the next generation." Weeks later, I stood alone in my office at sunset. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the same drawer where I once kept that broken glass paperweight, and pulled out my old nameplate. I held it for a moment, then set it beside the new one: Iris Mendoza, Chief Executive Officer, Westward Industrial Systems. Not bad for someone without an MBA. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed out, or replaced by someone who had the right credentials but none of the heart, you know exactly what this victory feels like. Hit that like button if Iris's story made you cheer. Drop a comment below. What's one lesson experience taught you that no degree ever could? And don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping workplace revenge stories. Your experience is your armor. Wear it proud. Because karma wears heels, just like Iris Mendoza.